Okay, so we're going to talk about skin pigmentation, and before we talk about that, I want to remind you about a specific cell type that's found in the epidermis. We talked about it in one of the previous videos, and that's the melanocyte. And the melanocyte, remember, the cell body of the melanocyte is actually found within the stratum basale, so that basal bottommost layer of the epidermis, but it has these huge long cytoplasmic processes that extend up through the stratum spinosum. So they come into contact with, and they are going to affect multiple keratinocytes within the stratum spinosum. All right, so since I reminded you of that, let's go ahead and skip ahead to the section that talks about skin pigmentation. All right, so your skin color, your skin tone is mostly determined by the amounts of melanin present. And remember, melanin is a pigment molecule, and it's those melanocytes that produce the melanin. So what is melanin? Okay, it's a pigment molecule, and it's actually composed of 2 amino acids of tyrosine linked together. So if you remember learning about amino acids are the monomers that make up proteins, and one of the 20 essential amino acids is tyrosine. And so it's kind of like a dipeptide type molecule, 2 amino acids of tyrosine linked together. Now it goes through a series of chemical reactions, and the enzyme that carries out those chemical reactions is called tyrosinase, potato. So tyrosinase, ACE referring to enzyme, tyros, that's referring to the tyrosine part. So this enzyme is specifically found in an organelle called a melanosome. So melanosomes are vesicles. They're a specialized type of organelle specific to melanocytes. And within that vesicle, found in melanocytes, there's this enzyme, tyrosinase, which carries out the chemical reactions necessary to convert tyrosine into melanin. And again, melanin is a pigment molecule, and it has the ability to absorb UV radiation. And so the primary function of melanin is to protect keratinocyte DNA from mutations that could be induced by UV radiation. So I'm going to switch to this image to describe how that happens. So here's our melanocyte. Here are the cytoplasmic processes that extend up through the stratum spinosum. The melanocyte, I'm going to have these little vesicle organelles called melanosomes. Within that melanosome, you'll have the tyrosinase, which is the enzyme, and you'll have lots of tyrosine amino acids. Tyrosinase will catalyze the chemical reactions necessary to convert tyrosine, the amino acid, into melanin, the pigment molecule. So these melanosomes contain lots and lots of melanin. Now, these melanosomes are going to travel, if you remember back from chapter 3, how vesicle trafficking within a cell. I showed you that cool video of vesicles being walked along microtubules. Well, these melanosomes will be trafficked along microtubules into these cytoplasmic processes. Then these melanosomes will actually leave the melanocyte via exocytosis. And then the keratinocytes will actually phagocytize those melanocytes and engulf them. And that's how, so if you were wondering how, if the primary function of melanin is to protect keratinocyte DNA, but melanin is produced in melanocytes, so how is it that something produced from one cell protects another cell? And it's because these melanosomes are released from the melanocyte via exocytosis, and then they are engulfed by the keratinocytes via phagocytosis, all right? And so now we get melanin, and that's why when we looked at these huge, long cytoplasmic processes extend up through the cells of the stratum spinosum so that all of these cells nearby, all of these keratinocytes that are near these cytoplasmic processes have the ability to engulf those melanosomes and get melanin inside of those keratinocytes. Okay, so structure, function, right? All right, so once the melanin is present in the keratinocytes, it's kind of cool. The melanin will actually surround the nucleus, right? The melanin gets positioned around the nucleus and on the side of the nucleus that would be most exposed to UV radiation. So this would be the apical surface. See, the sun would be up here, so the melanin is going to be on that side of the nucleus, protecting it shielding that DNA in the keratinocyte like an umbrella. And so the melanin pigment molecules will absorb UV radiation, hopefully enough of it to where it won't possibly mutate the DNA of the keratinocyte. So that's, again, the primary function of melanin is to protect keratinocyte DNA from possible mutations induced by UV radiation. Again, it's going to be that melanin will be present on the superficial side of the nucleus, which is going to face the exterior of the body and be more prone to UV radiation exposure. All right, this bullet point down here must be produced continuously to maintain consistent skin color because melanin degrades after a few days. So melanin pigment molecules can only absorb so much UV radiation and then they degrade. And so more melanin has to constantly be produced. That's why these melanocytes are located within the stratum basale of the epidermis. Remember, the stratum basale is closest to the dermis, and it's that dermis that is vascularized. So the melanocytes want to be close to the blood supply where they can receive lots of oxygen and lots of nutrients, because melanocytes are very metabolically active because they have to constantly produce melanin all the time. So they have to be they have to be nearby the nutrient supply. Okay? So let's see. So UV radiation has both immediate and delayed effects on skin pigmentation. This has to do with melanin when it's immediately exposed to UV radiation, it will actually oxidize and give a tan type skin color. And that's short term. And then the long term delayed effects of skin pigmentation is the fact that UV radiation will actually stimulate melanocytes to produce more melanin. So once you get some sun exposure, your melanocytes will start to produce more melanin, therefore more pigment molecules can absorb UV radiation, become oxidized, and give a tanned skin appearance. Okay, so give you a tan skin color. A secondary function of melanin is to reduce the synthesis of vitamin D in response to high amounts of UV radiation. So that sounds counterintuitive because earlier in the previous videos I was talking about how vitamin D is necessary for calcium absorption, and and we want vitamin D, but too much of a good thing is bad. We want, there are certain limits of certain amounts of vitamin D that we want because there are certain calcium levels that we have to maintain, but too much vitamin D. So if we have too much UV radiation, we'll have too much vitamin D being activated through that process that I discussed in previous videos. Too much vitamin D means excess calcium absorption and way high calcium levels in the blood. That's called hypercalcemia. And if you have too much calcium in your blood, it throws off ion balances, it throws off muscle physiology and nervous system physiology. You can have nausea, vomiting, muscle fatigue. It can cause kidney damage. So too much vitamin D and excess calcium in the blood is not a good thing. Too much of a good thing is bad, all right? So I'm going to switch to this to show you. I stole this picture from the internet because it shows you what this is talking about is individuals living in regions exposed to high amounts of UV radiation. So these areas of the world, right, that would have the individuals in these areas of the world would be exposed to higher amounts of UV radiation. So through evolution, individuals in these parts of the world their melanocytes started, through evolution, started making more melanin. All right? And more melanin means that your cells are protected against DNA damage because you were exposed to more UV radiation. And then also, it keeps individuals in these parts of the world from producing excess vitamin D. Whereas in other parts of the world where individuals would be less exposed, they'd have less exposure to UV radiation, their melanocytes don't need to produce as much melanin because they don't have to, they're not exposed to as much UV radiation. And then they don't want a lot of melanin because if they had too much melanin and not enough UV radiation, right, exposure, then they wouldn't be able to produce enough vitamin D. So I hope that makes sense. So that's kind of the evolutionary hypothesis as to how different skin colors evolved in different parts of the world, as individuals that were in areas that had higher UV radiation exposure needed more melanin so that their cells could be protected from DNA damage, but also to prevent excess vitamin D synthesis and hypercalcemia. Whereas individuals in parts of the world that are in areas that don't have very high UV radiation exposure, well, they don't need as much melanin, and then they don't want a lot of melanin because they need that, the little UV exposure that they get, they need that to help synthesize enough vitamin D. Okay? And an interesting fact is that almost virtually all individuals, no matter what your skin color is, virtually all individuals, humans, have identical numbers or very similar numbers of melanocytes. So whatever your skin color is, we all have similar numbers of melanocytes. So what determines skin color is going to be not the number of melanocytes you have, but how much melanin gets produced by those melanocytes, how much tyrosinase activity there is. So individuals who have melanocytes that have a higher tyrosinase activity will produce more melanin. And then another determinant of skin color is the type of melanin you have. This is determined by genetics, but whether you have pheomelanin or eumelanin. If you produce a lot of if your melanocytes produce a lot of pheomelanin, you will be on more of a yellow to red in color, this spectrum of skin tone. Whereas if you produce more eumelanin, then you would be in this spectrum of skin tone, all right? So your skin tone's determined by not the number of melanocytes, but the tyrosinase activity of your melanocytes, meaning how much melanin actually gets produced. Do you have more melanin or less melanin being produced? And then the type of melanin, whether it's pheomelanin or eumelanin. But we all have pretty much identical numbers of melanocytes, so that's an interesting fact. Let's see. Oh, and this bullet is just talking about how there are differences in the number of the distribution of melanocytes within our body. So palms of hands, soles of feet, those areas of your skin will have fewer melanocytes. So usually those areas are going to be lighter in color versus the rest of your skin. So the distribution of melanocytes is not evenly distributed all over the human body. Palms of hands and soles of feet will have fewer melanocytes. Variations in pigmentation. If you have freckles, or if you know someone who has freckles, what a freckle is a local area where you have increased pigmentation due to increased melanin production. So the melanocytes in that local area, just in that localized spot, produce a lot of melanin. So we have a localized increased pigmentation. Now, a mole is an area of increased pigmentation, but not because of increased melanin production, but because of local proliferation of melanocytes. So the melanocytes in that localized area are actually undergoing mitosis and proliferating and making more actual cells. So it's not just more melanin, it's more melanocytes in that area. And that's why doctors, like dermatologists, may be concerned of moles, right? They may want to do some sort of biopsy of a mole, is because it could mean that you have uncontrolled proliferation, meaning like possible cancer. So melanocytes, melanomas, are a very common type of skin cancer because your melanocytes are very metabolically active, and sometimes they can get some DNA damage due to high UV radiation exposure, and then they have an uncontrolled cell cycle. They overproliferate, leading to cancerous moles and melanoma. So that's why moles might be of concern, especially if they're really large and raised. It might mean that you have uncontrolled proliferation of those melanocytes. Now, albinism, individuals who have albinism, they still have melanocytes. So it's not that they lack melanocytes altogether. They have melanocytes, but the melanocytes fail to manufacture tyrosinase. And without tyrosinase, you cannot produce melanin. Therefore, you can't have you won't have skin pigmentation. And that's for hair too. Hair is also made of keratinocytes. So that's why individuals with albinism will have white hair, is because they don't produce any melanin. All right. And then they're also more prone to DNA mutations in their keratinocytes because they don't have melanin to help shield that DNA. And then you can read through this if you want. It's talking about how there's no such thing as a healthy tan, and how tanning can damage skin and lead to skin cancer. So you can read this on your own. Other molecules, other things that could affect skin pigmentation. Carotene, this is a yellow-orange pigment found in egg yolks and orange vegetables like carrots. And you would have to, have a really large intake of carrots for it to affect your skin color. But say you were living solely on a carrot diet, right? Carrots have a lot of this pigment molecule called carotene. It's a yellow-orange pigment, and it's lipid soluble. And so it will, if you just eat nothing but carrots, that lipid-soluble pigment molecule will actually accumulate in the stratum corneum. And you should be able to somewhat understand why, because we talked about how keratinocytes secrete a lipid substance that coats those cells. Well, if the cells of the epidermis are coated in a lipid substance, well, then a lipid molecule would be able to penetrate it, because like dissolves like, right? So a lipid substance will dissolve a lipid-soluble molecule. And so that carotene will accumulate in the stratum corneum, and it imparts a slightly yellow-orange color. And this will be really visible in areas of the skin with a thick stratum corneum, because more of that carotene will accumulate there. And so in thick skin, this is where you would really see that change in pigment. But you would have to ingest a lot of carrots over a long period of time. Now, hemoglobin, hemoglobin is the protein found in red blood cells, and it contains iron. And it's that iron that actually binds oxygen. And what happens if you see an iron rod outside and it gets oxidized? It rusts, right? And what color is rust? It's kind of a brownish red color. Same thing happens to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin contains iron. When the hemoglobin binds oxygen, it looks red. And so your blood flow, local blood flow effects can change skin pigmentation. So for example, it says hemoglobin's effect on skin color is indirect. It's an indirect result of blood flow in the dermis. So if you have an increased blood flow in the dermis, say when you're exercising, you may look more red, right? Whereas if you get really cold and the blood flow in the dermis constricts and you have less blood flow in the dermis because you're cold, then you might not look as red. You might look very pale. All right. So localized blood flow effects, whether you increase or decrease blood flow, can have a short-term effect on skin color. So skin color as a diagnostic tool, this talks about a few conditions. The first one being erythema. So erythrocytes, that's the technical term for red blood cells. Erythema is a condition in which you have increased blood flow and you might appear red, makes the skin more reddish. This is a normal response to, say, exercise. When you exercise, you have increased blood flow and you might take on a more reddish appearance until you calm down and relax, and that localized blood flow decreases back to normal. Erythema can also be present in other conditions such as trauma. So if you have a injury to the skin and it causes inflammation and increased blood flow to that area of trauma may appear very red and swollen because of the increased blood flow there. Fever, or even a systemic infection, those conditions could all lead to erythema, which is a more reddish skin color due to increased blood flow. Pallor is the exact opposite. So blood flow in the dermis decreases and you lose that normal kind of pinkish hue and you might look very pale. So this is especially visible in pale-skinned individuals. Let's see. And this is a normal response. So pallor is a normal response when the body's conserving heat. So if you're in a super cold environment, remember body temperature when it drops, that's going to set off that negative feedback loop, which results in blood vessels in the dermis constricting so that we don't lose heat through radiation, and those blood vessels constrict so that we reserve the heat and the blood flow for our internal vital organs to keep them warm, so you take on a more pale-ish appearance. This also can occur, pallor can occur when the nervous system or endocrine systems alter your blood flow due to a fight or flight response. So if you get really scared or frightened, you may take on a pale appearance, and that's because the nervous system will constrict blood flow in the dermis so that blood is directed more towards vital organs. And so you might take on a pale appearance there. Cyanosis, cyan is blue, right? So cyanosis would be when you take on a reddish purple or bluish hue, okay? This is more critical, and if you present with cyanosis, you definitely want to seek medical attention, and that's because that could mean that you have critically low oxygen levels in your blood. Now, blood is not blue. I just want to clear that up. A lot of times students very early on, they'll think that, okay, well, when you look at veins through your skin, veins are blue, and they'll think, cyanosis means low oxygen levels of the blood. Your blood is not actually blue. The blue appearance is an optical illusion, and it comes from the fact that certain wavelengths of light penetrate the skin better. Red wavelengths penetrate better than blue. Blue gets reflected, and so deoxygenated blood, if you're looking at it through the skin, can look somewhat bluish, but your blood is not actually blue. I just want to clear that up. Your blood is not actually blue. But yes, so cyanosis could mean, though, if you take on a faint bluish hue to your skin color, that could mean that you're having difficulty breathing, you have critically low oxygen levels, and you want to seek medical attention. Another thing that we could use as a diagnostic tool is, if you've ever heard of jaundice before, jaundice is a medical condition in which you have bilirubin buildup. So a normal thing that happens in your body is red blood cells are constantly recycled. We make new red blood cells all the time, and the old ones have to be recycled. And one of the breakdown products of hemoglobin is called bilirubin. And your liver has a way to take that bilirubin and put it into bile. It gets released through the digestive system, through digestive juices. If someone has liver damage, if their liver is not working properly, right, then your liver can't take care of that bilirubin, which is a pigment molecule. And instead of secreting it into digestive juices, it starts to get into the bloodstream, and then it accumulates in adipose tissue, and you can actually, and the whites of your eyes. And so you take on this orange yellow appearance, and that could indicate liver damage. So that's another, using skin color as a diagnostic tool. If you present with jaundice, that could mean you have liver damage.